Chapter 741 Conflict. After sensing a powerful force being directed toward me from the right side of my body, I quickly retreated away from Amanda. Just enough to avoid the sharp end of what looked to be a spear? It was difficult for me to tell as I sensed yet another powerful blast heading in the direction of my back. By taking a side step, I was able to avoid the blast and obtain a better understanding of who was attacking me. You dodged that. It was Edward and another man I didn't know of. Almost certainly the guild master of the Green Paw or whichever guild it was. Kyle, what happened? It wasn't until this very moment that the guild master took notice of the guy I dealt with earlier, and he dashed in his direction. So Kyle was his name. Amanda, are you okay? Is everything alright? Are you fine? Edward did the same and rushed toward Amanda while warily looking at me. Hey, I'm okay. Only after he made sure that she was fine did he finally sigh in relief. I'm glad that you're okay. Once more, he turned his head to look at me, and I could tell that the expression in his eyes was not one of friendliness. I scratched the back of my head. What am I supposed to do? I should be allowed to beat him up, right? I'm not going to lie, I'm very tempted. Back in my world, there were many instances in which I was on the receiving end of a loss, and I'm not going to lie. There were times when I was almost tempted to fight with him directly. What have you done to my Kyle? At that precise moment, I was looking to my right when I noticed a furious shout coming from that direction. After that, I saw a flash of something green across my vision, and then the man from before materialized in front of my eyes. His eyes had a brilliant scarlet color to them. I will make you pee, Uck. Before he could complete his statement, I interrupted him. I already knew what he would say, so I decided to cut him off before he could finish speaking. You must be the guild master of the Green Paw Guild, right? He struggled under my grasp. I could feel him exert a strength that was akin to the peak of A rank, almost A+. It wasn't bad, but to me who was SS- almost SS, it really wasn't anything worth taking note of. I looked straight at him in the eye. You came a little later than I originally planned. He persisted in struggling against my hold on him. I wrinkled my brows and tapped my finger over his body, and he went limp immediately. He looked at me with complete disbelief. As I was saying, I carried on while casting a glance at Edward, who flinched ever so slightly and was now approaching Amanda. My brow twitched. Why do you think you were even able to locate me if I didn't purposely show it off for you fools to find me? Do you really think I can't hide away from the lot of you if I wanted to? He continued to stare. He was struggling less. No. The reason why I even bothered letting you know of my location is because I needed you guys. This world was vast. Far bigger than the world that I belonged to. I knew from the moment that I arrived in this world that I would require the assistance of some kind of higher power in order to successfully navigate through it. While I wasn't completely unaware of my circumstances back then when I slapped that little man from the Green Paw Guild, I already had an idea that he would soon be bringing his guild to me. A chain villain was not to be underestimated. It was also why I wasn't surprised by their appearance. I squinted my eyes and firmed my grip on his throat. You don't want to die, do you? He shook his head. It took a bit, but he finally calmed down. His skin was red, turning purple, most probably due to how hard I was holding, and he had difficulty making eye contact with me. I wasn't unfamiliar with this type of gaze. That's good. I finally let go of his throat. Cough, cough. And he started to cough uncontrollably. I remained standing over him until he managed to calm himself down. Only then did I speak again. From this moment forth, your Green Paw Guild will listen to my commands. If you so much as oppose me, I'll annihilate your entire guild. The information is wrong. Extremely wrong. Edward felt his heart pounding wildly at his throat as he attempted to maintain composure. He started at the young man before him with dread. Initially, he believed he could deal with him. Edward was one of the top experts in the world, but as soon as he witnessed Jerome being treated like a child, he abandoned such aspirations. The sight before him shattered all common sense he had. He was only a bit more powerful than Jerome, and he didn't think he could defeat Jerome as easily as the younger man did. He had a sudden thought. He couldn't have reached. He gave an exasperated sigh and shook his head, putting an end to the ridiculous notion before it had even a chance to form. He didn't want to believe in such nonsense. It was impossible. All he could think of at the moment was how to get Amanda out of there safely. He quietly looked at his daughter. Her gaze was fixed on the young man, painted with what seemed to be hatred and disbelief. She seemed to be just as startled by his strength as he was. "Amanda," Edward called out, and she looked up at him. His eyes turned complicated when he looked at her. He took a deep breath and clenched his teeth. "In a minute I'll go over to him and fight it out. Do your best to escape in the meantime and—" "Seriously?" Edward felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end as a voice pricked his ear. Instinctively, he whirled around and punched in the direction of the voice. Boom! A large shockwave swept the surrounding area and Amanda's clothes fluttered. When the wind died down, Edward watched as a hand slowly and gently closed around his fist. He slowly turned his head upward and saw the same man who had been staring at him earlier with a troubled expression on his face. "Did you really have to hit me like that?" His gaze appeared to be apologetic, and he quickly released his grip on the fist, much to Edward's astonishment. Letting out a long sigh, he raised both hands. "Believe me or not, I'm not against you guys. How about we settle this peacefully?" Edward stared off into the distance at the other members of the Green Claw Guild before turning his attention back to the young man. He nodded his head. "I was just about to suggest the same thing." The man pinched the middle of his brows. "All right, I'll start off by saying that what happened back in the residence was a misunderstanding." He looked toward Amanda. "I didn't mean to go to her apartment." Edward looked at him oddly. He didn't believe him one bit. As if he could read his thoughts, the young man elaborated. "If I really wanted to do something, do you think you could have stopped me?" As soon as Edward opened his mouth to respond, he realized he had nothing to say. As a matter of fact, the young man probably could have accomplished whatever it was that he intended to do to them if he had really been intent on doing it. He was at a level of strength where only a select few could stop him. When he thought about everything that had happened up to this point, Edward felt a little more at ease. It's possible that there was a genuine misunderstanding. He turned his head to look at the young man, but instead the young man turned away from him and looked elsewhere. His expression appeared somewhat serious. Following his gaze and seeing that he was staring at nothing, Edward became confused. "Is there some? You can come out now. Your presence is fairly obvious." Following his voice, the area in the distance began to distort, and shortly thereafter, a man emerged from it. Edward's eyes opened widely at the sight of the man. He recognized him immediately. "Octavius? When did you get here?" Indeed, the man was Octavius. At this moment he was looking directly at the young man, and he didn't even bother to turn his head to look at Edward. "After observing your prowess, it appears that I've overlooked something of great significance. My original plan was to retrieve the 3 Grandmasters and place you under lockdown, but it looks like I'll have to make some changes to my plans." "Oh." The young man displayed a curious expression and gestured with his hand in the air. Almost immediately after that, a sizable barrier began to envelop the area around them, completely surrounding them within its confines as it did so. Octavius stared at the barrier that had enveloped them and his eyes rippled. As he closed his eyes, the world around him began to shake, and a formidable and limitless pressure began to emerge from within his body. As he continued to close his eyes, the sensation became increasingly intense. To this, under the weight of the pressure, Edward took a few precautionary steps back and looked off into the distance in disbelief. His astonishment only grew when he unexpectedly witnessed Octavius take a step into the air and begin to levitate upwards. Because of the way that his back blended in with the sun in the sky, he appeared to be an immortal that had descended upon the world. Impossible. At the sight of it, he felt an uncontrollable acceleration in the beating of his heart. It wasn't just him. Amanda and Jerome both looked at Octavius with eyes that were filled with complete and utter shock. Jerome, who found himself unable to tear his gaze away from Octavius as he stood in the air, was the first one to speak. In his eyes he looked no different from a god. "Sis rank," he managed to mutter before passing out. Chapter 742 Octavius Hall. Aren't they overreacting a little? The way the 3 of them were looking at Octavius was rather odd. It was as if they were staring at some sort of god. I wonder what reaction they'll have when I do the same. I was just about to do that when I suddenly stopped and my eyes opened wide. Why does his body possess the Akashic laws? And why can I feel them? My gaze was fixed on the murky white substance that was enveloping Octavius. It gave me a very familiar feeling. Boom. I put very little pressure on the ground as the area beneath me began to collapse into a crater. When I looked up, Octavius was staring at me with a blank expression on his face. The strength he was exerting was indeed S-rank, but the most shocking part was the white mist that was covering his body. It made his power soar all the way toward S+ rank. Boom. He wasn't a man of many words. Arching his back, he threw a fist my way, splitting the air in the process. I took a look down at his approaching fist and then I punched out with the same level of strength as he had. I needed to get a better grasp of his strength and the white mist that was covering his body. I had a feeling that I was about to unearth a very big secret. The aftermath of our two fists colliding was anything but beautiful. The warehouse collapsed, completely destroying the ground beneath it. Octavius showed a surprised look at the fact that I was able to block the attack and threw another fist. I retaliated in kind. Boom. I took a few steps back and stared at my hand, which was covered in a cloudy white substance. For some reason in that collusion small parts of it entered my body. This power. I wasn't wrong. This was indeed the Akashic Law, and my eyes couldn't help but widen at the realization. Why does Octavius have this sort of power? Shouldn't it just be Kevin who can wield such power? The more I reflected on it, the more concerned I became about the situation. Things were going in a direction that was completely outside my expectations. Is this really all you have? Octavius's voice rang from behind me, and I felt a powerful blow land on the right side of my abdomen. Shortly after, my vision blurred, and I seemed to have crashed against the remains of the warehouse. Despite that, I was in no major pain. If anything, my heart hurt after seeing the state that my warehouse was in. I slowly stood up and patted my body clean. Damned bastard. The sounds of explosions continued to echo from a great distance away. The ground began to shake and the air began to twist. The entire plane was thrown into disarray just from the aftershocks caused by the collision between the two. If not for the barrier that surrounded the place, Edward was afraid that their conflict would implicate the nearby city. Never in my life did I believe that someone could reach S rank. The shock that Edward was going through right now was unlike any other he had experienced in the past. Before his eyes, he was gazing at two beings who had surpassed what was deemed to be possible. I understand Octavius, but someone else? If there was anyone that could have reached such rank, Edward believed it would be Octavius. He could accept that. But how come there was someone else who was capable of achieving such power? Moreover, he looked to be the same as his daughter. Do people who reach such rank grow younger? It was the only explanation he could think of. Boom. Amanda, come here. After hearing the sound of another explosion, Edward moved quickly toward Amanda in order to shield her from the aftereffects of the collision between the two. Ugh. He let out a groan and took several steps back. This is too much. Concerned, he cast a worried glance around the place. There were still people there from the Green Claw Guild laying on the ground in addition to the members of his guild. He was afraid that they'd be implicated in the conflict between the two. He grit his teeth and looked at Amanda. For now, help me collect all of our members and place them in the furthest part of the barrier. What about you? Amanda asked, her voice tinged with worry. Don't worry about me. Edward reassured, caressing her head. Looking toward the battlefield in the distance, he murmured. If I'm careful, I should be able to survive. I felt a light breeze brush past me, and then I saw a fist coming closer to my face. I ducked my head to the side and sidestepped the punch that was coming my way. After that, I gently pressed my hand against his stomach, and his entire body shot off into the distance. I didn't bother following up as I once again focused my attention on my hand. The opaque white substance that had been surrounding it before was even thicker. When I clenched and unclenched my fist, I could feel that I had some degree of control over the power. Why is that? Was this something that Kevin had planned for me? Somehow, as I stared at the newfound power, I felt that the more I fought against Octavius, the more I could grasp it. I turned my head to look at Octavius before taking a step forward. I was in front of him in a matter of seconds, at which point I threw a gentle punch in his general direction. Boom. He counterattacked with his own punch, but in the end he was the one who was pushed back several steps. There it is. When Octavius and I parted ways, that was when I noticed a thin white thread moving away from him and linking toward me. Fascinating. Unaware of what was happening, Octavius's face, which had been expressionless up until that point, became a little more surprised, and his eyes became a little clearer. How are you this powerful? This shouldn't be possible? I thought they told me there was no one else capable of fighting against me. In response to his words, I wrinkled my brows. I was making slow but steady progress toward a better comprehension of the mystery that Kevin wanted me to solve. Who is this they? I asked while standing squarely in front of him once more. As soon as he saw me, his foot came flying toward my face, but I was easily able to avoid it while lightly kicking his foot and causing him to stagger back several steps. It seems like the more I touch him, the more I can control this Akashic law. As we fought, I was dumbfounded by the fact that I was gradually absorbing the hazy white that was enveloping Octavius and that he also appeared to be displaying an increasing number of emotions at the same time. Was this a link? Was the hazy white liquid the reason why he couldn't display emotions? Boom. I continued to punch, kick, or even headbutt. I used every part of my body to fight him, and my assumptions soon turned out to be correct. With each punch, kick, slap, and headbutt I delivered, his power began to dwindle while the opaque white substance I was able to control began to grow. Not only that, Octavius's eyes began to become progressively clearer. It was as if he was starting to become normal again. If that made any sense. Boom. How are you this strong? It shouldn't be possible. Octavius shouted with a shocked expression. Long gone was his apathetic and calm look. What replaced it was a man who was filled with emotions. It was at this moment that I came to get a better understanding of what was going on, and my expression turned grim. Easily dodging his fist, I extended my hand forward and grasped his shoulder. I thought I heard a small cracking sound, but it was probably just my ears. I ignored his contorting face and closed my eyes. While I was carefully sensing the Akashic laws that were revolving around his body, I soon noticed a small white orb in the middle of his body and tried to absorb it. The orb seemed to be thick in Akashic laws. What are you doing? I paid no attention to Octavius's shouts and instead kept my attention on the small ball that was located inside of his body. My expression, on the other hand, changed as time went on, and I quickly released my grip on his body. Boom. My body was struck by a powerful force, and as a result I was propelled a great distance away. Crashing against the ground, I felt several of my bones break as my body spasmed on the ground. This time Elle truly felt it. The pain was terrible, but I was already used to the pain. It was one of my many friends. I deliberately shut my eyes and took a long, deep breath before slowly raising my body so that I could look into the distance. In there, I was able to catch a glimpse of Octavius laying on the ground, unconscious. His entire body was trembling, and I forced myself to stand. I inched my way closer and closer in his general direction. Because of what just happened, I was able to verify something. I let out a small groan while stumbling forward. The power Octavius wields. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to come to a stop in front of him. After I had fallen to my knees, I reached forward with both hands and grabbed his head. It's the same as Kevin's. A white glow dyed my vision. Chapter 743, Octavius Hall. She was beautiful. More so than anyone I'd ever seen in my life. She was someone whom I couldn't take my eyes away from. She was the love of my life. My everything. What do you think? I think it looks quite nice. The air seemed to echo with a soft but endearing voice. It belonged to a beautiful young lady in her early 20s, whose brown hair waved at the ends. Her features were flawless and her face was soft. She was beautiful. Extremely so. It looks awful. A man muttered. He recoiled in horror at the sight of the room, which was dominated by the color pink throughout. He cast his gaze in her direction. You took this too far. Oh please. She rolled her eyes while casting a glance toward her belly. It was slightly bulging. Since you're training all the time, I took it upon myself to decorate the room. If you're unsatisfied, then you should have spent more time with us. Ugh. After groaning, the man sighed and sat down on a nearby stool. As he continued to survey the surroundings, he eventually gave up and lowered his head. You're right. I guess this is the price I have to pay for being busy. EY. The woman glared. You're making it sound as if it looks terrible. You know, I've put a lot of effort into this place. Oh sure. The man raised his hands in resignation. You're right and I'm wrong. The woman smiled. Extremely pleased with the man's words. It's good that you know. I was satisfied with my life. Happy with it. Every day I would wake up happier than the next. Life was perfect. I loved it. I thought it'd last until my last days. I could still envision my future back then. It was beautiful. So beautiful. Every day I'd wake up with joy just thinking about that future. I was not. The surrounding walls were almost entirely dominated by the color white. There was a lingering smell of stale alcohol in the atmosphere. And in the background, there was a faint rhythmical beeping sound. A husked figure lay on a small bed within the room. There were metal tubes connected to her chest, and there were thinner tubes made of plastic connected to the veins in her arms. Her lips were dry and her eyes were hollow. A hand grasped her hand tightly. It belonged to a young man. He looked at her with distraught eyes. She took her first steps today. I wasn't there, but I got a video of it. He took out his phone and played the video. A cute girl with her hair pulled back into a ponytail and sporting a cute little frown was seen approaching the camera. She had just taken 2 steps when she tripped and fell forward, at which point she began crying. The husky figure slowly turned her head to look at the video. Haha. The man laughed, finding the little girl cute. She looks just like you. Even her frown is the same. He covered his mouth with his hand and rubbed it. His eyes started to redden a little, but he didn't show it. At long last, a response came from the woman. Even though it was only slight, Octavius noticed that the corners of her mouth turned upwards slightly. Before he knew it, something warm began to run down the side of his cheek, and he squeezed her hand even more tightly. You think she's cute too, right? Ah, of course she is. She looks just like you, so get better. He pursed his lips. Get better so that we can finally be together and live like a family as we've always dreamed of. Okay. Near the end of the sentence, his voice began to crack and warmth continued to trickle down the side of his cheeks. She was still beautiful to me. Even when she was like that. In my eyes, she was the most beautiful person in the world. Nothing could take that beauty away from her. So, why did she have to leave me? Why did the world take her away from me? You are. The wail of a child could be heard all throughout. They went on and on and on, stopping only when the child became tired. Octavius lay on the sofa, his gaze directed toward the ceiling of the room. It was pink, a color he hated. His chest trembled as he took a breath. He turned his attention to the right where a glass pane stood and looked at his own reflection in the pane. His eyes were sunken in, his hair was a mess and his clothes were a mess as well. Who is he? Octavius found himself questioning the look of the man that was reflected on the glass. Was that supposed to be him? He looked nothing like him. That's not me. He tore his gaze away from the mirror, adamant in his belief that he was merely seeing things. You are. Right then, the child began to cry again, and Octavius turned his gaze toward the small girl who was laying on the white crib opposite him. She's probably hungry, right? It was the only thing that could explain why she was crying. Octavius blinked a few times before leaning his head against the sofa and turning his attention to the bottle of milk that was sitting next to him. After pondering for a while, he chose to leave it where it was and continued to listen to the child's cries. You are. The cries continued and stopped in cycles. Sometimes they'd go for hours, sometimes for minutes before stopping. Octavius spent his time listening to them with his eyes closed. It was the only sound that filled his empty heart. The only sound that reassured him that he wasn't alone. Losing my emotions. It wasn't purely just for the sake of power. I just wanted to forget. Numb myself from the pain. They call me strong. The strongest human. If only that was the case. I'm not strong. I'm just a coward. Ashton City Community Orphanage. Octavius stared at the sign in front of him. It belonged to a small chapel and he could hear the sound of children playing in the background. They seemed rather happy. In his hands was a small girl that was quietly resting with her thumb in her mouth. His lips trembled as he gazed at the orphanage in front of him. When he lowered his hand to gaze at the young girl in his arms, he found himself torn. This is for the best. He didn't want to, but he knew this was the best decision he could take. He was a danger to her. For her, he couldn't allow himself to be near her. He wanted to love her with all of his heart, but he was too broken to love her. He didn't deserve her. His chest trembled once more as he gazed at the orphanage in the distance. Closing his eyes, he firmed himself to move forward. Just that. Dada. His feet came to a sudden stop as a sweet voice called out for him. Octavius felt his entire body freeze at that moment, and he lowered his gaze to meet two innocent eyes looking directly at him. They were so pure. "Dada." She called out again, her little hands reaching out for his face. Octavius's lips trembled and he slowly brought his head toward her. Her hands soon touched his cheeks and she let out a series of soft giggles. Octavius let out a soft whimper as he heard her laugh. He suddenly found that his legs were frozen and the orphanage in the distance was a lot further than he had originally thought. Throb. His chest throbbed and soon something trickled the side of his lips, dyeing bits of the ground in red. "Hi hi hi." The young girl continued to laugh as she pulled his hair and played with his face. "Please stop." The more she did that, the greater the pain that Octavius felt. His resolve was starting to wane. "No, I can't allow that." He grit his teeth. The orphanage inched closer. It was no longer as unreachable as it was before. He was a danger to her. He couldn't allow her to stay with him. "Come, Melissa, be obedient." With a wave of his hand, the little girl, Melissa, closed her eyes and fell asleep. Feeling her rhythmical breath, Octavius took a deep breath and turned his gaze toward the orphanage once more. He gently kissed her on the head before moving forward. "Hello, is there anything that I can help you?" Meeting him at the entrance of the building was a nun holding onto a small broom. She had a soft smile on her face and seemed rather friendly. When her gaze landed on the little girl in his hands, she came to an understanding. "You want to leave her here in the orphanage?" Octavius swallowed before nodding his head. "Why, yes." "Oh my." The nun looked quite troubled. Just before she could say anything else, Octavius took out a black card and handed it to her. "There's over 12,000,000 you in the card. Please take it." The nun looked surprised when she saw the card. Looking back at Octavius, she asked, "You seem rather wealthy, why are you leaving her here?" Octavius smiled at her but didn't answer. He pushed the card forward. "Please." The nurse stared at the card for a moment before setting the broom to the side. She then headed toward the entrance of the orphanage. Octavius felt his heart drop when he saw this, but just as he was about to turn and leave, he heard her voice calling for him. "If you don't mind, why don't you follow me into the orphanage? I'm sure you'd want to see the place before sending your daughter here, right?" Octavius's eyes lit up when he heard her voice and quickly followed her in. "Thank you. Thank you." The chapel was rather small, with wooden benches on the side and stained glass all over. The place was dimly lit and its center was a small statue. It was a man holding onto a book. Who is that man? For some reason, Octavius felt drawn toward the statue in the middle. He felt entranced by it. "That." The nun smiled and walked up to the statue. She moved to its side and looked at Octavius. "This is our protector." "Protector." "Indeed." The nun smiled warmly. "He is the one that grants us strength. He is the one that grants us food. He is the one that grants us protection." Before Octavius could say anything else, the world around him suddenly turned white. Chapter 744, Octavius Hall 3. I took a deep breath. As I moved away from Octavius, who was lying down on the ground in front of me, I experienced a range of conflicting feelings. This is as far as I can extract. I was only able to retrieve a limited number of memories from his mind before my abilities started to fall apart and I was ejected from his consciousness. It was the first time that something like that had occurred, and I must admit that it caught me off guard. That being said, I had seen enough. The orb must be a defensive mechanism to stop anyone from prying any deeper. A pity it stops right when things were getting spicy. It was the only explanation that I could think of at the moment. Thinking back about his memories, I wasn't sure how to react. I somewhat expected this after seeing Melissa's memories, but this runs deeper than I originally thought. I finally found the answer to a lot of the questions that had been plaguing me for quite a while. So this is why Kevin sent me over here. It was to make me realize that there was another power within the world that was controlling everything from the shadows. While I wasn't completely sure of its purpose from what I'd witnessed, it appeared as though its goal was to eliminate and stop all those that had certain levels of talent, leaving only Octavius to reign at the top. Someone whom they had full control of. The real question is, who is the one controlling everything? It had something to do with the records. That I knew, but I wasn't sure if it was the records themselves. Protector of the seat of diligence? Was that what he said? My brows furrowed as I pondered over the memories I'd witnessed. It was then that I heard a slight groan coming from beneath me. Ugh. Octavius slowly opened his eyes and our gaze met. Staring at him, I extended my hand and thin white threads forced themselves out from his body before moving toward my direction and entering the palm of my hand. With each passing second, Octavius's eyes became clearer and clearer, and once I reached the point where I could no longer take in any more of the white thread, his eyes turned completely clear. He started mumbling incomprehensible things while looking around him in a confused state. His face was pale and he seemed to be displaying all sorts of different emotions at the moment. He was a far cry from the Octavius that I knew. Compared to the stoic and powerful man that I knew, the man that was before me was a frail shell of what he once was. He seemed broken. I bent down to meet his line of sight. How about it? Have you come to your old self? It felt like a long dream. A long and hazy dream he could only witness but not be a part of. The memories were faint and he felt comfortable in them. He felt powerful. Almost invincible, and best of all, he felt numb. So numb that he managed to forget all the pain that had haunted him for a very long time. He felt great. That, however, did not last for long. It all came crashing down at one point. He wasn't sure when, but that comfortable dream started to crumble right before his very eyes, revealing to him the truth that lay behind that sweet and beautiful dream. A nightmare. Huh? What's going on? His memory was fragmented, but he could more or less come to an understanding of what had happened not long after. He lowered his head to stare at his hands. His lips were dry and his body was weak. He felt pain all over, and most importantly, he felt his chest ache once more. Waves of different emotions came crashing down on him all at once as different images appeared within his vision, displaying all the things he'd done during that one long dream. There were many of them, and all of them were of him doing inexplicable things. Killing, blackmailing, kidnapping. The more he witnessed, the more he felt that he was suffocating. It was as if he were in the deepest part of the ocean, surrounded by water, pressuring him from all sides. It made breathing impossible. How about it? Have you come to your old self? It was a soft voice that brought him back out of those depths, and he raised his head. It was there that he caught a glimpse of two deep blue eyes staring directly at him. Though fragmented, Octavius had an idea of who he was. He was the man that had pulled him out of his dream. Why you? Octavius struggled to find his words. He tried, but every part of him hurt. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. As if noticing that, Octavius felt the two eyes drift away from him. It seems like the after effects of our fight were a bit stronger than I thought. Have a rest for now. Darkness overtook Octavius's vision. I wanted to ask him a few questions, but it looks like I'll have to do that later. I sighed and moved my eyes away from Octavius. He was in no state to talk at the moment. Massaging my chin, I waved my hand and 4 people appeared before me. The moment they appeared, they stared at me with incredulous eyes. I smiled. How was it? Did you enjoy the sight? The 4 continued to stare at me without saying a word. The way they looked at me felt rather uncomfortable, but I somewhat expected this. What I showed them was a power that far surpassed this world. To them I looked no different than a monster. Would they believe me if I told them that they had a similar level of strength in my world? I shook my head and shifted my attention toward the distance where I could see Amanda and Edward in the distance. He seemed rather haggard at the moment with a pile of people behind him. He was most probably protecting them from the aftershocks of our fight. Oh right. Thinking about how much strength I used, I felt apologetic and waved my hand once more. The barrier that was surrounding us disappeared, revealing several cars behind. They were in pristine shape. I looked toward the 4 beside me. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but let's go for now. There are a few things I still need to figure out. I looked toward Octavius. And I still need to talk to him. Where would you like to go? The driver stuttered as he gazed at me through the front mirror. I turned to look at the haggard Edward beside me. Is it okay if we go to your guild? He looked at me and blinked several times. I could tell by the look in his eyes that he didn't want to go, but after he swallowed his saliva, he gave the driver the signal to go ahead and leave. Yes. Let's go to my guild. It was only after his confirmation that the card picked up the pace and sped through the streets. Several cars trailed us from behind. The car was rather quiet during our journey, but I paid no mind to it. At the moment I was preoccupied with a different and more problematic matter. Tisk. Octavius's head smacked against my shoulder and I pushed him away. This was the third time it happened and I was starting to get annoyed. He's annoying even when passed out. I pushed his head toward the other side. It was at this moment that I heard Edward's voice and I turned to look at him. He seemed to have composed himself a bit. Yes. Just thinking about the small explosion that had occurred a while back, I knew better than to touch whatever was sealed within his body. I may have been caught off guard, but it was definitely not something I could touch lightly. The only thing I could do was hope that Octavius had recovered enough to answer my questions. Since I have removed some of the laws that were surrounding his body, I should be able to get some answers, right? I wasn't sure, but I could only hope. My mouth twitched and my head snapped toward my right. Why do you keep, No, fuck, he's drooling. Chapter 745, Emotionally Immature. The Fallen Angel Wing? Whatever the guild's name was, it was the same as the Demon Hunter Guild in terms of layout. I felt at home the moment that I entered the guild, baffling Edward. In the lower grounds of the guild. Wake up, you've had enough sleep. I pressed my hand against Octavius's head and channeled my mana into him. He was currently bound on a chair opposite me, and his body jerked the moment my mana entered his body. Where am I? He looked around in confusion before his eyes settled over me. It's you. Somehow he was able to recognize me in an instant. That was a good start. Yes, it's me. Whatever that means, and if possible, I'd like it if you calmed down a little. I wouldn't want him to pass out again. Your head should be a little clearer. You should be able to think for yourself for once. While I didn't know much, from what I was able to figure out regarding the power that was circulating within Octavius's system was that it was slowly consuming his emotions and essentially turning him into some form of emotionless warrior. Sort of like a robot with diluted emotions. I looked at him and reassured. If you're worried about suffering a potential backlash, don't be. With me here, nothing will happen to you. I've also already caught a glimpse of your memories and have an understanding of what happened, but... I paused. There's still some things that I'm unclear about and hence why I'm currently with you. Silence filtered across the room following my words, and I continued to gaze at Octavius, who was similarly looking back at me. While I wasn't capable of reading his mind, I didn't need to. His face said it all. You've done a lot of fucked up shit under the influence of the power you wielded. I'm not sure how bad, since the only one who knows this best is you. But that's not what I care about at the moment. What I care about at the moment is figuring out who was it that made you the way that you were and what was the purpose behind giving you the power. It wasn't clear to me before, but it was clear to me now. If I wanted to get back to my own world, I had to figure out who the one controlling everything from the shadows was. Once I figure out who it is that is responsible for all of this, I'll finally be able to get back. I'm sure of it. I looked at Octavius. He was the key to helping me determine who was responsible for everything. Puff. Cough. He coughed several times. Clearly he was still quite injured from our earlier conflict, but I didn't care. I wanted answers. Why you? How are you so strong? The question he posed wasn't what I wanted to hear, and my brows furrowed. Don't worry about that for now. Answer my question first. Who is the one behind you and why did you do the things that you did? Octavius opened his mouth before lowering his head. I don't know. I knew he wasn't lying from how helpless he looked. You don't know? What don't you know? Who is the one behind the matter, or what the purpose behind your power was? I don't know who is the one behind my power. He answered after a short struggle and cast his gaze on me. You say you have seen my memories. You should know that he's never shown himself to me. Even while I was under his power, I never got to catch a glimpse of his looks. All I know is his title. Protector of the Seat of Diligence. I finished the sentence for him. This title was one of the things that stood out the most in his memories. Protector of the Seat of Diligence. Sounds eerily similar to one of the 7 virtues. 7 deadly sins. My brows furrowed. It couldn't be right? Alright, I believe you in the fact that you don't know who this protector is, but you should at least be aware of what his purpose in giving you power was, right? Can't you tell me what he's ordered you to do over the past few years? That. Octavius's eyes flashed with complex emotions. Organizing his thoughts, he eventually answered. I don't remember much. However, from what I recall, my mission was simple. That is to make sure that I stood at the top of the world. My brow raised. That's it. Yes. Octavius nodded his head. That's it. He added. My goal was that simple. It was to remain at the top of the world and eliminate anyone that comes close to my power. I bit my shirt and pondered before asking. Is this the reason why you had the 3 grandmasters imprisoned and sentenced to death? Yes. They were growing too powerful. They were the closest to reaching the next level and I was ordered to eliminate them. So that's not the first time you've done something like this. It's not. Octavius shook his head and I lowered my head. I've also been tasked with keeping watch on those that show particularly strong talent. My job is to make it so that they don't develop to their full potential. I see. It's as I suspected. Pondering over his words, a lot of things started to make sense. Thinking back at my world and recalling how the 3 grandmasters had all fallen during their peaks. It looks like their deaths had nothing to do with the demons. From the looks of it, the one responsible for their death was probably the higher power that lurked within this world. Perhaps the reason they were killed so early was because things were moving at a faster rate than they were now. Ha. I suddenly found myself laughing, catching Octavius off guard. Is there something funny? No. Don't mind me. I suddenly thought of something absurd. I covered my face as an absurd thought crossed my mind. While this world is indeed a lot more peaceful than the one I belong to, it's just as bad as the one I belong to if one looks carefully. While not many people are aware, they're merely a bunch of sheep inside of a large herd. If not for the demons. I laughed again. One could argue that the demons were the ones that gave humans a chance at freedom. Did I say something funny? No, I told you it's something else. I looked back at Octavius and stood up from my seat. Thank you, I think I got a better understanding of what I'm up against. I'll take my leave now. Wait. I was stopped before I could leave. Yes. I looked at Octavius, who pursed his lips. His eyes shook a little and his head lowered. He seemed to be struggling to find the right words, and I think I saw something that closely resembled fear in his gaze. I found myself stopping at that. See, can you do me a favor? Hum. Melissa was in a good mood, to the point that she began humming while she was arranging the items on the table in front of her. This was an extremely uncommon occurrence, and if anyone who knew her were to witness it, they would be astounded beyond belief. La yulu. It had to be said. She was not the greatest of singers. In fact, she was rather terrible. So much so that Rosie, who was still frozen in place in the distance, started to fear for the glass around the lab. It was shaking. Datum pulum catum chica. Melissa drummed her fingers over the desk. With the influx of information inside her mind, she felt invincible at the moment. Instantaneously, all of the obstacles that had been preventing her from making further progress in her research were gone, and from that point on she was able to conduct experiments without encountering any problems. So smooth was her life in the lab that she herself was baffled by the results. She was on cloud 9 at the moment. Money in the rich girl's world. The glass began to shake even more and Rosie's face became increasingly pale. She started fearing for the worst. Ding! It was a blessing that the bell at the lab's entrance suddenly rang at that precise moment as Melissa immediately stopped singing. It didn't take long for a frown to appear on her face, but the thought of all the money she was going to have soon was enough to convince her to go ahead and open the door. Since I'm in a good mood today, I'll let this one slide. When she reached the entrance, she pressed her hand against the side of the door. Her expression froze as soon as she caught a glimpse of the man who was standing on the other side of the door. Her mood instantly sunk after that and her expression turned gloomy. It's nice that you haven't forgotten about me, Father. Chapter 746. Emotionally immature. Even after he heard his daughter speak in a cool, detached way, Octavius' face didn't change. He had long since expected such a reaction. Everything became clear once the power he wielded was no longer with him. When Melissa looked at him, he was able to tell just by looking at her expression what kinds of feelings were going through her mind at that very moment. They were expressions he'd seen many times in his life. He wasn't unfamiliar with them. "May I come in?" he asked, looking around and frowning at the sight of the frozen girl in the distance. Why was she like that? Why do you have to come in? It appeared as though Melissa did not want him to enter as she blocked his path. Octavius lowered his head and fixed his gaze on her. She looked the same as she did when she was younger. Perhaps she was even more beautiful. Her angry look is also the same. A long-forgotten pain began to reappear in his chest, and his expression nearly collapsed. He was able to retain it after a fierce struggle, and after looking around he returned his gaze to Melissa. I need to talk to you. His voice was calm and soft, but the manner in which he spoke made Melissa feel as though she could not refuse, and she moved to the side in reluctance. Make it quick. She had no desire to interact with the man in front of her, but what could she do? Kick him out? The world's strongest human? Pifty, as if that stubborn bastard would even bother listening to my demands. Melissa could only resign herself to the situation and lead him toward her private lab where there was no one. It was in a bit of a mess at the moment, but she didn't care in the least bit. Since he came so abruptly, she had no time to clean it, and even if he had made an appointment, she wouldn't have cared. He was a stranger that shared the same blood as her in her eyes. Clank. She closed the door behind her and turned to look toward her father. She wanted to get this done quickly. Out with it, what is it that you want? Feeling a rough hand against her cheek, Melissa froze halfway through her sentence. Her eyes soon opened wide as she looked at the man standing opposite her in shock. What are you doing? She smacked the hand away and moved several steps back. With her sleeve, she rubbed her cheek and glared at the man. I know that you're my father, but who gave you permission to tea? You look exactly like her. She froze after hearing his voice. It wasn't so much the contents of his voice that made her freeze, but the softness of his voice. Never before did she hear him speak to her with such tenderness. When she looked up at him, she was even more shocked to see her usually expressionless father staring at her with an expression that was different from its usual self. He seemed to be in pain. She looked exactly like you when she was younger. He may not have directly stated who the she he was referring to was, but Melissa had an idea of whom he was referring to, and as she observed him, a lump formed in her throat. She had no idea how to react at the moment. My stomach is starting to hurt. In her 20-plus years of life, this was the first time that her father had talked about her mother, and she could vividly see the emotions in his eyes. He looked frail. Melissa took off her glasses and pinched the middle of her brows. What are you trying to achieve over here? Do you seriously expect something from me? You don't have to pretend to be like this. If you want something, just ask away. I'll see if I can help you. She sat on a nearby stool and bit onto her nails. The way he was behaving was giving her anxiety. Emotions made her cringe. The neglect she faced during her younger years made her emotionally immature. She wasn't capable of understanding emotions properly, and anything related to them made her cringe. It was for this reason that she buried herself in her research and avoided people. It wasn't so much that she hated them, but she was incapable of interacting with them. Emotions repulsed her and gave her anxiety. She scratched the side of her neck. Fuck, I want this to stop. Octavius's current behavior was akin to torture for her. Octavius smiled at her words and similarly sat down on one of the nearby stools. He covered his mouth with his hand while leaning his shoulder against the table. There were many things that he wanted to say to her now that he had finally managed to regain clarity over his own head. However, as he looked at his daughter who was seated opposite him, Octavius found himself unable to say anything. He couldn't recall everything, but the few tidbits that he managed to remember were no pleasant memories. Thinking of how he had treated his daughter for the past few years, the disappointment in her face, the times he saw her cry, and the times she tried to meet his expectations only for him to disregard her efforts. He felt his heart squeeze. I've failed as a father. He unconsciously blurted out loud. Melissa's body stiffened at his words and she looked at him with a baffled look. Octavius smiled. It was a forced one. Every time he looked at his daughter, he felt himself drowning in even more pain, but he bore with it. This was the price he had to pay for his actions. Your mother's death. He took a deep breath. It affected me in more ways than you can imagine. She was my everything. I was happy back then. In more ways than you could imagine. It felt as though I had everything in my life. A soft smile unconsciously spread across his face as he thought back at those moments in the past. He was truly happy back then. She was everything that I could ever ask for in a partner. Caring, funny, annoying. He let out a soft chuckle at the last part and he felt something toward the corner of his eyes. He slowly lowered his head to gaze at Melissa, who was staring at him with a scrunched-up face. His gaze softened. You couldn't imagine just how happy I was when I heard of the news that she was pregnant. I was happy, really happy. Alongside the day he decided to marry her, that was single-handedly the best day of his life. Just the thought of starting a family excited me. Every day I would wake up thinking about the future. Life was perfect. His chest slowly moved up, and the smile that had spread across his face slowly subsided. The moment I lost her was the moment that I lost myself. Octavius didn't even bother looking at her. He couldn't find the courage to look at her. He was just laying out what was bottled up within him. She deserved to hear the truth. For everything that he'd put her through. Many have hailed me as the strongest human in existence, some sort of talent that has never been seen before. Octavius shook his head. It's a lie, all of it. The more she listened, the more Melissa found her face contorting. What is he doing? Why is he saying all of this? And why now? Whatever he was trying to do, it was too late. Why did it feel as though someone was stabbing straight through her heart? For some reason, his words were piercing her. She didn't feel comfortable. She wanted to leave but found herself unable to. Staring at her father, who for the first time in her life seemed to be displaying emotions, she found herself rooted in her seat. She clenched her teeth. "Ah, fuck, this sucks." She wanted to throw up at this moment. She could feel it in her stomach. With each passing second, the feeling was getting clearer and clearer. She covered her mouth with her hand while her foot repeatedly tapped against the ground. She felt suffocated. She was everything that I could ever ask for in a partner. Caring, funny, annoying. Make this end quicker. She didn't know when, but she soon felt an iron-like taste in her mouth. Thinking at how her lips were stinging, she associated it with her lips bleeding. Just the thought of starting a family excited me. Every day I would wake up thinking about the future. Life was perfect. Scratching the side of her neck, she soon started to notice that her hands were sliding against something wet. And when she looked, she realized it was her own blood. Make this stop, I hate this. I hate this, stop. Melissa. Hearing her name being called, Melissa raised her head. It was there that she found her father staring at her with a smile. It was a forced one, and droplets were streaming down the side of his cheeks. I'm sorry. Blurg. She threw up. Chapter 747, Figuring Things Out. 1. Swoosh dash. Swoosh dash. A sword streaked through the air, cutting through it in a swift manner and giving rise to a whistling sound. Sweat trickled toward the ground, quickly evaporating the moment it touched it. Swoosh. Amanda swung her sword again. You're not fitted for the sword. Her grip on the hilt tightened, and she found herself swinging with even more force as her teeth clenched tightly. Bastard. She wanted to refute his comments. They were denying her efforts and the blood, sweat, and tears she shed to get where she was. It was denying her efforts. Every time she thought back at his face and the condescending look he gave her as he said those words, Amanda found herself hating him more and more. It's just that. What if his words are true? She stopped swinging the sword and lowered her hand. What if the words he said weren't a lie and were the truth? But how's that possible? There's no one within my age group who is as strong as me. There's no way what he said is true. She was trying to convince herself, but thinking about the strength that he displayed, Amanda found herself starting to doubt herself even more. She looked at the sword in her hand. Perhaps. Plank. The door to the training ground suddenly opened, and when Amanda turned her head to see who had entered, her face crumbled. It was him. Someone looks a bit hostile. I could feel Amanda's glare from the other end of the room. She didn't look all too pleased with my presence. What are you doing here? This training ground is occupied. Oh, I know. I nodded my head and continued to move forward. Amanda was dressed in a form-fitting uniform that accentuated her curves beautifully, and she had her hair pulled back into a ponytail. However, even though she looked very alluring at the moment, the thing that caught my attention was the sword that she was holding in her hand. You still haven't changed your weapon? I was hit by a more powerful glare. Who are you to tell me what I should do and what I shouldn't do? Haha. I found myself laughing at her tone. She was being incredibly cute at the moment. Is there something funny? If looks could kill, I'd probably be dead 1,000,000 times over. Sadly, looks couldn't kill. Maybe when my charm levels up. That'd be interesting. No, don't mind me. I just think that your reaction is quite cute. I extended my hand and my sword appeared in my hand. Amanda frowned at my words and took several steps back. She had a sudden look of understanding. Is this how it is? Did you purposely say that I'm not fitted to the sword so that I would develop some sort of interest in you? She looked at me in disgust. If that's your goal, then I suggest you give up. I have no interest in a squid-looking man like you. I found myself freezing on the spot. Oh, Did I hit the spot? Were you actually trying to use this chance to flirt with me? The level of disgust on her face increased, but I didn't care. At that moment I felt something within me snap. Did she just call me a squid-looking man? Ah. I found myself grasping for my chest as I felt something prick it. It hurt. Me? A squid-looking man? No. I'm sure she's just saying this because she's angry with me. Yeah, it had to be that. Could only be that. Phew. I took a deep breath and recovered my composure. Alright, let's not fall for her taunts. She's clearly just angry. I smiled at her and removed my sword from my sheath. Amanda's eyes narrowed when I did so and she took several steps back. What are you doing? Were you so hurt by my words that you now want to silence me? My mouth twitched and I shook my head. You're misunderstanding. I'm not trying to do anything of the sort. I'm just going to spar with you and let you understand why I said what I said. I took another deep breath. I didn't say what I said back then just to insult you or flirt with you. The reason why I said what I said is because I truly do think that you're not fitted with the sword. While she may not realize it just yet since she was too weak, the moment that she broke into A-rank she would definitely come to realize the flaws within her swordsmanship. And by then, it would be far too late for her to fix. She may not be the same Amanda from my world, her current personality being a dead giveaway. Or perhaps not even be real, but I felt compelled to correct her at the moment. Actually, come to think of it. Who was it that told her to use the sword? It was definitely odd that Edward didn't notice the flaws in Amanda's swordsmanship. But thinking that he wasn't yet S-rank, I could only attribute it to the fact that he was simply not yet strong enough to tell. Let's be serious for a moment. Show me what you've got. I urged her on by pointing my sword in her direction. She didn't seem convinced regarding the spar, so I pushed further. Come, you're about to spar against someone who's far more powerful than the strongest man in this world. I'm sure you can set aside some misgivings to learn from me, or... I purposely stopped while narrowing my eyes at her. Are you afraid that my words are right? That seemed to have done the trick. Instantly, Amanda unsheathed her sword and aimed it at me. Her face was as cold as ice. Fine. She stepped toward me and swung at me. TSK as expected. She's really not talented with the sword. It was the second time that I sparred with her, and it became even clearer to me that this wasn't it. Clank. Too obvious. I slapped the side of the blade, making Amanda lose her balance. Landing softly on the ground, she punched me again. Clank. Too wide. Clank. Your movements are wrong. Clank. Oof, even my grandma is more flexible than you. Your movements are way too rigid. Clank. Really? I grew more and more disappointed as time went on, yet at the same time I found myself enjoying every bit of the time I was spending with her. It was really fun. I soon lost track of time. Could have been an hour, 2 hours, or even more, but we just continued to spar on and on and on. It was only after Amanda was completely gassed that we finally stopped. Ha che. Her heavy breaths echoed throughout the training grounds. Though faint, I could see that the edges of her mouth were curled. She must have enjoyed herself. I'm glad. I sat down next to her. No matter how different she was from my Amanda, she was still her. Convinced yet? Nope. She shook her head. Unlike before, her tone wasn't as venomous. I massaged my forehead. Ugh, you're really stubborn. Get used to it. Haha. I laughed. He was quite the character. Maybe when I come back I can share my memories with Amanda. I wonder how she'll react. I grinned when I thought that far. Hey. I turned to look at her. What is it? Why are you smiling like that? Are you thinking about someone? Oh. I raised my brow. How did she know? When I looked at her, I soon found myself smiling. Yes, I was indeed thinking about someone else. Her eyes narrowed, but she soon turned her head away. I see. Are you curious as to who I was thinking about? No. Amanda shook her head and stood up. Who you think about is none of my business. Is that so? I also stood up and stretched my back. At the same time I put my sword away. Well, if you were curious, I was just thinking about my girlfriend. Amanda stiffened on the spot and I found myself smirking. Ho, what's this? Why are you reacting like that? Are you perhaps embarrassed that you realized that I wasn't flirting with you? Like what? Amanda looked at me calmly. She stared at me coldly and answered. I was just surprised by how someone that looks like you managed to get himself a girlfriend. Oi. I glared at her. She really knew how to hit my sore spots. I'll have you know, like. It was all of a sudden the door of the training room opened and a familiar figure walked in. She had short auburn hair and her face was as exquisite as Amanda's. Amanda, there you are. Where were you? I was trying to Ari. She stopped halfway through her sentence and looked at me. She opened her eyes wide and pointed at me. Who is he? Your beau. No. Amanda cut her off before she could finish her sentence. He's just someone who I was sparring with. Oh. Emma nodded, not entirely convinced. Were you sparring the whole time? Yeah. What for? He said that I'm not fit for the sword. What? Emma opened her eyes wide and looked at me. Are you serious? Did he actually say that? Yeah. Amanda nodded her head. He seems to think the opposite of your dad. Is she talking about Waylon? Was he the one who suggested Amanda was a better fit for the sword? Ugh. Emma shook her head. And what's the result? Was he right or was my dad right? Amanda smiled while she looked at me. Well, I don't know yet. So far, I still don't believe him yet, but we can only ask Oliver later. I blinked twice. Oliver? Who's Oliver? Chapter 748, Figuring Things Out. I'm sure I heard Oliver. Did I hear wrongly? I didn't think so. My dad's been kind of busy lately. I haven't even seen him around these past few days. Is that so? Yeah, but it's not like it rarely happens. It's been like this since I last remember. I'm sure you understand me. Yeah. I interrupted the conversation between the two. Scratching the side of my cheek, I altered my gaze between Amanda and Emma before finally settling on Emma. What did you say that your father's name was? Emma looked at me strangely. You don't know who my father is? She paused and furrowed her brows. Oh, never mind. It's not like he's some sort of big-shot celebrity. Why should I expect everyone to know his name? His name is Oliver. Amanda answered for her and I found myself blinking several times again. Oliver. Yes. Only after Amanda confirmed it once more was I finally convinced that I didn't hear incorrectly. Oliver? Why is his name different? This wasn't the name that I knew of. I looked at Emma. By chance, do you know of anyone that goes by the name Waylon? Perhaps he was still called Waylon but went by a different name in front of people? It wasn't impossible. Or so I thought. Waylon? No, I've never heard of him before. Emma looked at Amanda. Do you know what he's talking about? No. I see. I had no choice but to give up when I saw that neither of the two knew who Waylon was. I guess it makes sense in some way. Even though everyone I interacted with in this world had the same name as the ones in my world, it wasn't impossible for some others to have names that were different. After all, this was a different world and its history was completely different. The fact that their names were the same was the odd part. Well, whatever. I shrugged the thought off. It didn't seem like a big deal. Ding. Right then, I received a notification on my watch. I smiled when I looked at it. They're faster than I expected. Ashton City Community Orphanage, Middlestone Street 56. I read more. During the time that I was able to catch a glimpse of Octavius's memories, the orphanage was the one thing that stood out to me the most. That was as far as Octavius's memories led me, but that was enough. Sir, we will be arriving shortly. Emichum. The view from the window of the car revealed a run-down neighborhood. There were no towering structures and most of the homes were on the modest side. After what I did to the Green Paw Guild, I felt as if my life suddenly became simpler. In addition to having an excellent information network, they also provided me with a personal driver. It was no thanks to them that I was able to find the orphanage this quickly. We have arrived. The car stopped and the driver got out. Coming around, he opened the door for me. The orphanage is up ahead. He pointed at a certain chapel off in the distance with his finger. It was uncannily similar to the way it appeared in the memories I saw. It was probably a little bit more rundown, but other than that, it was pretty much the same. Would you like for me to wait for you here? That's okay. While calmly observing the distant chapel, I shook my head. From the exterior, nothing seemed amiss. It looked perfectly normal. It was as if this was just a regular chapel. You can leave, I can go back on my own. Sending the driver on his way, I fixed my clothes and moved toward the chapel. Secretly, I started to channel my mana and demonic energy. If what I saw in Octavius's memories was true, then whoever this protector was, they weren't something that I could make light of. "Welcome to the orphanage. How may I be of assistance?" Greeting me was a nun. She was a different nun than the one from Octavius's memories. She seemed rather young, and what particularly struck me were her deep blue eyes. I greeted her politely. "I just wanted to take a look. You see, my wife and I have been thinking of adopting." "Ah." The nun's eyes lit up and she smiled brightly. "Why, if that isn't great news?" She led me toward the chapel. "Come with me inside for a moment. I will contact the head nun and let you see the children." "Thank you." Creak. The wooden door creaked as the nun pushed it open, revealing a dark interior lit only by the flickering flames of a few candles. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and decay. When my eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, I looked around to notice the pews were draped in tattering black cloth and the walls were adorned with faded paintings that were no longer discernible. There was something unsettling about the paintings, but I couldn't quite make out what it was. There it is. At the center of the chapel stood a familiar statue. Its marble surface was chipped and stained, clearly from the wear of time. My feet came to a stop and I stared at the statue from where I stood. It looks normal. The statue was just a statue. Observing it from where I was, there didn't seem to be anything odd about it. I thought I'd be able to notice something since I can now control a bit of the laws, but it didn't seem to be the case. "Are you interested in the statue?" I heard a distant voice. When I looked up, I saw an elderly nun making her way toward the statue. I squinted my eyes at her presence. She seems familiar. She made a favorable first impression on me. Something about being in her presence was soothing, and it made me want to put my faith in what she had to say. But it was that sort of impression that made me warier of her. Still, I didn't outwardly display my wariness and merely smiled at her. "I am indeed interested in the statue." I took a few steps forward and curiously looked at the statue while pinching my chin. I've been to many churches in my life and I've never seen such a statue before. I was just wondering who the statue is depicting. A question I'm very used to. The nun smiled, caressing the statue next to her. "Our chapel doesn't belong to a religious branch. You can say that this statue does not depict a god." I cocked my head. "That's rather interesting. A chapel was a place of worship. If they weren't worshipping a god, what were they worshipping? Did you say that you were interested in taking a child for adoption?" I was momentarily thrown off by the nun's unexpected question, but recalling what I had said to the other nun at the entrance, I nodded my head. "Yes, my wife and I are looking to adopt." "Is that so?" The nun smiled and I found myself frowning. For some reason, it felt as though I was being seen through at this very moment. I hadn't experienced anything like it in a very long time, and it wasn't a pleasant sensation by any stretch of the imagination. Especially ever since I reached the strength that I currently possess. "Is there something wrong?" Her smile was unsettling. "Why am I getting creeped out with someone that has no shred of mana in them?" "There's nothing wrong." The nun shook her head. "It's just that we don't appreciate it when someone lies." I raised my brow. "Lie. Emichum." The nun nodded her head. She then gently caressed the statue. "Protector has already revealed everything to me. You're not here for the children. You're here for him, aren't you?" I didn't like how things were playing out. I sighed while shaking my head. I shouldn't be surprised. I'm sure whoever was controlling Octavius must have seen what I did to him. Think thus far, I let out a long breath and nodded my head. "You're right. I did indeed come to meet this protector of yours. I'm not really looking to adopt children. I decided to come clean. There was no point in lying anyway. What I needed to do now was figure out who this damned protector was so that I could finally go back to my own world." "That's much better." The nun clasped her hands together. She seemed genuinely pleased by my words and moved away from the statue. "What would you like to know about the protector?" Her words caught me off guard. "Am I not going to meet him?" "Meet him?" The nun's eyes squinted at my words. "You wish to meet the protector?" I thought I made that pretty clear. "That is not possible." The nun shook her head, her eyes closing into thin slits. "The protector isn't someone you can meet as you please. They have far more important tasks at hand than meeting with the likes of you. Even after everything that I did to Octavius and the power I displayed, this so-called protector refuses to meet me?" As if I believe that. Tasks? Like what tasks? Keeping balance. The nun replied, her tone reverent. The protector is in charge of keeping the balance in this world. Balance. I almost laughed at her words. Is keeping balance the same as eliminating those who have talent? This became pretty obvious to me after I heard what Octavius had to say. What this so-called protector did was nothing short of cleansing those who had a certain level of talent and accomplishments. Yes. The nun nodded, admitting everything rather quickly. I was taken aback. She's not even going to deny it? That is indeed one of the many roles of the protector. There are more roles? Indeed. The nun replied. The protector is also in charge of blessing the world. Wait. I had a sudden thought and my eyes opened up. When you mean by blessing, you can't be saying, yeah. It is indeed as you're thinking. The nun cut me off before I could finish. You and the people of this world should be thankful to the protector. If it weren't for the protector, your world would have never gotten into contact with mana.